Good morning. Today, I get to introduce you to my new friend from Alabama. You'll love the way she talks. Caris Snider. She is a writer, a speaker, and a coach, a mom and a wife. I think a mom of two. Is that correct,
That
Caris?
is correct. Yes.
Caris, tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and your ministry, and then we'll get going because I've got some fun questions for you. Well, you may not think they're fun, but I enjoyed writing them.
Well, I am ready for the adventure that we are about to go on. So,
Uh-oh.
yes. So, thanks for having me. Like you said, I am a mom and a wife. I have been married to my husband for 19 years. We're going to celebrate 20 years in April of 2024. And for another date, another podcast, we met. He was actually in a Christian boy band. So if you can just envision NSYNC or, Backstreet Boys dancing
Wow.
and singing about Jesus, that was him. So
Wow.
we can have that discussion another day. But my children, I have two daughters. I have a daughter. Her name is Zoe. She is in ninth grade. I have a high
Mm.
schooler. So this is a brand new journey for us into high school. And then my youngest daughter, her name is Allie Grace, and she is in fifth grade.
Mm.
So it is, God's sense of humor. I grew up with brothers. And so to
Wow.
have daughters is just a whole new thing for me, but I absolutely love it. I love being their mom. And then, as you said, I am a speaker, writer, certified life coach. I've been speaking for about 12 years now, and then writing and coaching came in after that. So I am just grateful for the opportunity just to love on women
Yeah.
and to let them know, that God has a great purpose and a plan for them, and that he will waste nothing, not even pain in their life. He will use it all for good.
Mm. Well spoken.
Yeah.
I taught ninth grade English for 10 years, so you're welcome to call me anytime. And also, I have three daughters, so I one-upped you.
Oh,
But
okay.
I kept hoping for a boy. My youngest goes, "I'm sorry, Mom." Um, but we adore our daughters, and they keep us at the bank and on our knees. So just keep that in mind. Your latest book is called The Car Line Mom, and you also have a wonderful podcast of that name. 100 days of encouragement for the mama who gets everybody everywhere. Isn't that the truth? When your kids are younger, you think you're going nuts, but when they get to where you need to take them everywhere, you are so glad when they finally get their license. So, tell me a little bit how this got started. And we all know someone who was in a car line this afternoon, or we are that person. So tell us a little bit about the book.
Absolutely. So, like you just said, as moms, we are all kind of in this mode from toddler to teenager of getting everybody everywhere that they need to go. We are not only in charge of our schedules, but their schedules. And then now, I have just discovered in this season of being a mama, there's this added pressure that we have put on ourselves where we feel like we have to do all the things and that we have to have it all together, and we can't fail. We
Hmm.
can't make a mistake. We have to get it right the first time, and then we got to post it on social media with the right filter. We show that perfect part of our house where everything is just as it should be, but
Hmm.
no one sees the rest of the house that's in chaos. And I think a lot of times it's not just our houses that feel in chaos, it's our spirits that feel in chaos, or it's our minds that feel in chaos. And so I found myself in that place where I was just constantly feeling overwhelmed with anxiety, overstressed, overworried, playing out these worst case what if scenarios. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if anyone else has done that. You play out all these things that might happen, probably never will, but by the time you get to those end credits, in your mind of that movie, you are in full on panic mode, just stressed and just paralyzed in fear. And getting through all these overs of all the bad things, I just got to a point where I was just really a little over it. Like, this is not what God has for us. This is not what he intended for us. And so this idea, the desire of my heart behind Carline Mom, was really to just help us as mamas to get into the overflow of God's presence, to get into the overflow of his peace that he has for us, and that his grace is sufficient in our weaknesses, not in our strengths, but in our weaknesses. And so for us to know that we are all weak, none of us have it
And,
all
and
together.
to celebrate that.
And to celebrate it, that is good news for us. That is not bad news. And so to change that perspective, I think that could be a powerful thing for us as moms to know that we are not in this alone, that God never intended us to be, to have it all together. He knew we were going to need him, and he knew that we would need each other. We
Mm.
need each other in this journey. So all of that culminated together. I was like, I live my life in the car line. There are so many stories, so many conversations. Maybe you even experience this
Mhm.
as well with my daughters that come in the car. There's something about not having to make eye contact with each other that
Yes,
opens their mouths. You know what I
so
mean?
true. Oh yeah,
Have you experienced that as well?
totally. And I had a friend exhort me at one point when I was still in the car line area of my life, where she said, I don't do carpool for the very reason that my son will talk to me in the car when I pick him up. She always met him with a bottle of water and a snack. So as
Mm,
soon as he got in the car, he could be comfortable. And then on their drive home, then he would open up. Not every single time, but I thought,
right.
oh, I whined about having to pick, three kids up at three different schools. But then I thought, wow, Cindy is right. And I really appreciated that bit of wisdom. Would you mind unpacking that line you used about two paragraphs ago, the overflow of God's presence? What does that mean to the normal person listening to
Mm,
this who knows God exists and they believe in his word, but they haven't experienced an overflow of God's presence for a very long time?
mm. I love that question. I think for me personally, the way that I would explain that is in these moments that we experience as moms, where maybe we just find ourselves crying because we're stressed out. We feel like we're failing
Yeah.
our kids, or even feeling like we're letting God down. That even in that moment of tears or big emotions, you feel some sort of peace to know, okay, I'm not abandoned in this moment. I know that in God's word, he tells me that he'll never leave me or forsake me. So I think, first of all, there's that piece of that overflow of God's presence to know that he hasn't abandoned us, even if we feel like we should be abandoned, like
Right.
we should be forgotten. He is not going to do that. He's going to get down in the trenches with us. And then I think another piece of that overflow of his presence is that he's always there. Like he is just always there. He won't stop loving us. He won't stop giving up on us. He won't stop wanting to meet with us. I love the verse Psalms 94:19 that says, when anxiety is great within me, your consolation, your comfort, which means God's comfort, brings me joy. So that always gives me this peace of knowing that I can always run to God, into his arms. I don't have to run from him because, sometimes when we feel ashamed, we feel like we have to run from him.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that his word reminds me that I can run to him, that is just another piece of that overflow. I think of his presence is that I can always, wherever I'm at, he's there. And as I run towards him, there it is. There's his
Could
presence.
could you repeat the reference again for me, please?
Psalms 94:19.
19. Okay.
Yeah.
Why did you become a coach?
I became a coach because I wanted to help women specifically change their thoughts so they could change their life. For me, about 12 years ago, my thought life was just filled with fear. I was paralyzed with fear and anxiety, and it was dictating my life and it was overtaking me. And I realized just through a lot of healing and restoration that I needed to go through that I had some thoughts wrong and I needed to work on getting those changed so I could change the direction that my life was going. And I wanted to help women do that, to know that, there's this part of our brains where there's something called neuroplasticity, where we can
Mm.
change the pathways of our brains to change how it thinks, to change how it responds to things. And if we are intentional in that, if we are intentional in using healthy coping skills, in changing our thoughts and changing how we respond to our faith and our mental health, then it will help change our trajectory in our life and the ways that we're going. And so that's where my desire came for a coach, is wanting to just help women to move forward in their thought life so that they could continue moving forward in the calling that God has placed on them.
I just talked to another coach, Mamika Cooney, and she talked about neuroplasty as well. And she calls herself the personal trainer for the mind, which is similar to what you do. And how is this different what you do to a therapy? Because you were talking about fear and anxiety, and my daughter's a therapist, so she deals a lot with fear and anxiety. And also, she told me years ago that every therapist has a therapist. So,
Right.
first of all, do you have a coach yourself? And why did you do this instead of therapy? Or how different is your coaching versus therapy? Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. So I actually have a coach for myself, and I do have a counselor that I saw many years ago on a regular basis and still have contact with her whenever I
Mm,
need her. And so the reason I picked coaching, I knew to go and be a counselor or a therapist, that would involve a lot of schooling for me to go back in
mhm,
school and learn those things. And where I was at as a mom and a wife and in doing the other things that I was doing, I just did not feel that was the direction for me. So for me as a coach, I don't get into the past where things
mm,
are rooted, as therapists do so well. They help us get to those roots of things that we have in our life. For me as a coach, I'm going to help you where you feel stuck right now in your present to move forward.
okay.
And then I've had clients that I have coached, and many times as we are working on our present situations to move forward, those circumstances, past things will come up, and you can tell
Sure.
that there are still those deep wounds there. And so for me as a coach, it's very important that I pause and say, you need someone like a counselor,
Right.
like a therapist who can help you here now that this has come up. And so, as a coach, that's so important for us to know that we can partner together with a therapist, with a counselor to help our clients who are truly wanting to move forward, to work and move forward when those places come up that need healing and restoration. I know for me, my counselor, she was a godsend in
Mhm.
my life to get that I needed, which opened the door for me now in my coach to begin to move forward, as a business owner, as a speaker, as a writer, and just in every other part of my life. So that for me as a coach is very important, to be sensitive to all aspects for our clients.
One thing I have written about and and speak on is mentoring, which reminds me of coaching. And um, I think that's something that we have to be aware of as older women. Not that you're old, but you're older than others.
Right.
Um, and we all have someone who's a little bit further behind us, even not chronologically, you know. And I think that we can get this savior image or feeling like we have to save this person. And so I like to bring up the whole fact of, if you feel like you're the only one for this person to help them, you're really in a dangerous place, because of course we bring people to the healer, we don't do
That's
the
right.
healing, but we also have to release them if we are not the right person for them. And so I appreciate the humility that you just expressed, that you need to evaluate as best you can. And I'm sure you're getting better as you coached through the years, that you feel
Yeah.
more confident saying, this person is not right for me. I had to ask a coach friend once, do you ever turn someone down? And she goes, oh, absolutely. When I know I am not that person to help them really heal their past, like what you were
Yeah.
saying. I have a hard question for you. Maybe it won't be that hard, but I thought of it today while I was exercising. So who knows what it really is. But why do believers need a coach to find their purpose? Um because we read in the word to love God and to love our neighbor. We read in the word to live as Christ and to die is gain. The word tells us our purpose. We are to make disciples. So why in the heck do we
Hmm.
need wonderful women like yourselves to find us a purpose? I mean, I wake up every day thinking, wow, not really, not every day, but I think, wow, what is going to happen today that's part of the purpose? But I'm old, so I've been doing this for a while, but why do
Hmm.
we need you?
Yeah.
We should know, here's my should. We should know better, Caris. We should. I mean, we have the word, we have your devotionals, we have maybe 2 minutes in a car line to ask God for help, because that's our biggest prayer. Dear God, help me now. Like
Yeah.
when my kids you have been upset with me, and then I go in the shower, that's my prayer closet. My biggest prayer is, Lord, help me to know what I say once I've washed my hair, and may it not be the wrong thing. And that can happen even worse when the kids are older. I'm telling you, I'm
Mm.
very, I'm very expressive and I talk too much. So, all that to say, going back, why do Christians need a coach to help us find our purpose?
First of all, that is a hard question. So I would like to acknowledge that, but I appreciate that question. You know what? I think through the Bible, no one in the Bible did their journey alone. And I think specifically to Paul and Timothy. Timothy had a Paul. Like if there was no Paul in Timothy's life, would he have known, you know, where to go and how to walk in his purpose, and to not, you know, let fear stop him, but to stand strong in what God had called him to do. So I see that, you know, example for us. And as a coach, you know, for us as human beings, it is very easy for us to, if you're looking at like a piece of paper of your life, for example, an 8.5 by 11, it is very easy for me to zoom in on that one little tiny dot, that one little circumstance, and that is all that I can focus on and think about. But a coach, what they can do is they have like a 20,000 foot view, and they can see that entire page of your life, and to see that that's not the only thing going on. So they can help you zoom out to change your perspective. They can ask you questions to challenge your thinking, because we do need to be challenged at times so that we can grow, so that we can learn. And you know, they help you to look at everything instead of that one thing. But I also think, you know, in that coaching, it brings about some accountability. That's what my coach has brought about for me. I have somebody that I answer to. I mean, of course we answer to God, you know, in our life, but that coach, every coaching call that I have with her, I know in the next month she's going to ask me, you know, tell me about how everything went. You know, what
Yeah.
were your struggles? What were your successes? And so to have that person there in my life where I can be honest and say, here were the struggles, but I also have that person there to celebrate with me in the victories, you know, that I'm not
Yes.
alone.
So true.
I think, you know, you need both. You need to
Mhm.
have that. And so a coach helps us to do that. A coach will ask those questions. A coach will be that accountability, and they're going to help us to zoom out when it's so very easy for us to zoom in and not know how to zoom out on our own. Does
That
that
is,
make sense?
oh yeah, it does. And
Okay.
I hired Tanya Kubo for a year for unlimited 15-minute phone calls. And I go, I'm going to call her every day. Well, no, she would give me assignments. And sometimes it'd be 2 weeks before I could talk to her again. I thought, And it's exactly what I needed, because I didn't want to do everything she suggested, but it was good for where my goal was heading towards. And she also helped me clarify that. And then my mentor has said things to me like, don't you know what your secondary spiritual gift is? I'm not going to tell you. And I don't think she told me for about 8 years. And
Wow.
then finally she just gave up and gave in. And I said, oh, it gives you clarification. And also you just feel so totally loved and supported.
Yes.
And we need that so much. So I hope that
Yes.
question wasn't too hard on you.
No, that was a
Um,
great question.
and of course, all those verses that I mentioned, also caring for the widows and the orphans, which widow and which orphan. I mean, we need clarification, because we only have 24 hours in a day, and we don't even have that because we're supposed to sleep part of that time.
Right.
What is your biggest discovery about God by becoming a mother?
Oh, wow. I honestly think it is his unconditional love. I
Why?
mean, he loves us, and it has nothing to do with who we are and what we do. Absolutely nothing. And it's like, you know, as the word tells us, that he cast our sin as far as the east is from the west. He just forgets, and he continues to love us in the same way. And when I had my children, you know, even in those moments where they might roll their eyes at me, or we may have an argument over what's going in the lunchbox that day, or, you know, or in those moments where they just need someone to love them, you know, and it could happen within 30 minutes of each other. That love is there, that, you know, and I think that is so powerful. And becoming a parent, it allowed me to see that in God, that there are no conditions on his love. I can always come to him as I am, just as I am. And the wonderful thing about God is that he doesn't leave us there. He lets us come to him as we are, and he loves us, but he loves us in a way that he helps us to grow in his grace, grow in his goodness, and to make changes that we might need to make, to ask for that forgiveness if there is some sin there in our life, and to change that path where we're going. You know, we turn, we pivot from whatever that sin might be. But you know what? If we make that same mistake again, his love is still there.
Right.
Love is still there. And I think that is one of the main things that I've learned with my children, is that unconditional love.
Let me tell you a funny story. Well, it's funny to me.
Right.
Uh, my oldest was begging for a dog when she was in 8th grade. And I was thinking this would be a really great help to me as a mother of an 8th grade girl feeling insecure about
Mm.
herself. Her clothes were not as expensive as her friends and boyfriends, whatever. And it's just a very typical thing. But we'd had a dog before, we'd had a cat before, we'd had a rat before, and
Oh my.
my husband, a pet rat, and my husband had, had to take them all back. And so he was standing on the stairs one day and saying, the girls have shown they're not responsible, so we're not getting a dog. And he rarely is very forceful, but he was saying this with a very Iowan type stubborn, he's from Iowa. This is not going to happen, Sue. And I said, he goes, they blew it. And I said, God is the God of second chances. And I gave you a second chance because he had proposed 3 years earlier. And then I said no the first time. I said yes.
Ah.
3 years later, I said yes. But of course, he just looked at me like, I wish I had never asked the second time. But we got a dog
Yeah.
and it worked out. And of course, he walked the dog the most because
Oh, of course. It's the as it should be.
yeah,
Like my husband does as well. Yes.
yes. And the point of it is that he was gracious enough to hear me out, but God is so much more gracious that he
Yeah.
is the God of not just the second chance, but the third, fourth, fifth,
Third.
and
Yeah.
16th. And that's what we teach our children when we keep forgiving them over and
That's
over
right.
when they're driving us crazy. I like this thought you wrote on your website. God wouldn't put you in your role as a mother if he wasn't going to equip you to do that. Now that someone may hear that today and go, well, they didn't mean me. So I'm going to repeat it. God wouldn't put you in your role as a mother, excuse me, if he wasn't going to equip you to do that. Now, is this actually true across the board? Because we've heard of inept mothers that should never have been mothers.
Mm. I think it is true. I do think it's true. I wouldn't have put that, if I didn't think it was true. I think that God will equip us. There are moms out there who have those doubts of, can I really do this? Can I raise these children? Can I love these children? God, are you sure this is right? I even asked that question. Are you sure? Are you sure, God, I'm the right person for the job? And he doesn't get it wrong. He doesn't get it wrong. We have, because of the fall of man, there is that fall. We don't have it all together. And so I would want to speak specifically, I think, to those moms who wonder if they're gonna mess their kids up, who wonder, are they going to be able to be all they need to be for them? And the answer, I think, to that, first of all, are you going to be all that you need to be for them, is no, because God is all that they need. So our job is to not be all the things for them, but to be a funnel of leading them to the one who will be all the things for them.
And I think a constant for me, sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good.
A constant thing for me, especially, it's a lot trickier when they're older because they don't want to be told, and yet they get mad if you don't give them the right thing to
Right.
Recently, one of mine was bemoaning a situation, and I didn't want to preach at her because when you preach at a child, they run away. And so I just said, that really sucks, which I don't normally use that word,
Yeah.
being 71.
Yeah.
And I go, that really sucks. And so is a really much of an idiot on so many levels. And that's all I wrote. And it was about 5 minutes later, she goes, is that all you got? And I thought, oh no, I've got the whole New Testament and half the Old, honey.
Yeah.
But since you gave me this permission. So to me, it was like, Lord, what do I say? What do I say? What do I say? And that's what we do when our kids are any age. I mean, my mom was a wonderful mom. She's in heaven now and enjoying all sorts of chocolate. But she would say, do you want to hear some unasked for advice? And we go, no. And then she'd give it anyway. And that was not what I wanted to do. And I still do it.
Yes.
Because we know what's right. We're kind of like that coach and we see the whole thing,
Yeah.
but our kids only see how they were hurt that day.
That day.
And so we start with the sympathy, and then if they give us permission, we move on. You help women cope with depression, anxiety, and shame. How are your, I already asked this question. How are your strategies different than therapists? You said you don't go back to the beginning. Is there anything else I missed on that?
I don't think so. I think and part of my strategy as well, and this is probably a lot like a therapist, is just to let them know they're not alone,
Mm.
to let them know that it's not just them. I also, there is that empathy for me because I've been there. I know what that feels like. But I also, I was in another part in my life many, many years ago where I was a part of those in the church who didn't think anxiety and depression were real and
Mm.
had a very cold, response to those who were struggling.
Mm.
And I learned very quickly just how real it was, just how real their struggle was. And to know that, that it's hundreds of millions of adults worldwide, and not just adults, but teens who are struggling with that. So for me, even as a coach, knowing that and having that opportunity to understand what they're feeling and what they're experiencing and to be sensitive to that, I'm grateful. Again, that goes back to how God will use our purpose in our pain. He will use everything for good. It's not wasted. So I think, that is another part for me as a coach that I can relate to those situations that they might be experiencing right now.
If someone listening today is feeling depressed or anxious, what 2 or 3 things could you give them some free coaching through my podcast?
Absolutely. Yes, I would.
Maybe just 2 tips.
Well, yes, my first tip would be to you, if you are feeling those ways, feeling, anxious, depressed, just paralyzed in that fear, my first tip for you is to acknowledge it, to say it out loud, to say, where you're at, what your starting point is. Even Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane said, my soul is overwhelmed
Yeah,
to the
so
point of
good.
death. So if Jesus can acknowledge where he was, you can too. Your Savior gives you that perfect example that you need to acknowledge. And then I think my second tip to you would, and I would probably, can I give 3? Can I give 3
Sure.
tips?
Oh, I said 2 to 3, but I didn't want to put pressure on you.
No, you're good. My second tip would be that you need to have a community that will bear your burdens, and you ask them to help you. Help is not a 4-letter word, meaning it's not a bad word. Galatians 6:2 tells us that we are to bear one another's burdens.
Yep.
And so fulfill the law of Christ. And then I think that third tip that I would give you is to get a journal, get notepads. I have notepads everywhere, all on my desk, and start taking your thoughts captive. We are told that we are to demolish every argument and to take those thoughts captive. And you have to be intentional about that. We're intentional about, hopefully, what we're putting in our body, the things that we're doing. So we need to be intentional about our thought life, write them down. Yes.
When that's kind of a Christian cliche, if you're not familiar with scripture, to take your thoughts captive. Can you give me a practical, what you actually mean by that?
Yes, I mean to stop, halt it. When thoughts come in, they don't have to stay there. When our brains, we have tens of thousands of thoughts that come into our brains every day. And when a thought comes in that feels negative against you, or feels like it is something that is belittling you or putting you down, like I am not enough, I can't do this. Maybe it feels like a should bully. You're shoulding all over yourself. It doesn't get to stay. So you can ask yourself, is this thought a helpful thought or a hurtful thought? Is it helpful? Is it hurtful? And you can even write it down, helpful ones and hurtful ones. If it's hurtful, you can get rid of it. And one way that I do that in a physical sense, because I'm a visual person, when I write it down, I will just kind of throw it away. You can rip it up, you can wad it up and throw it away.
Well, that's a good idea.
And then you want to replace it. Well, what's a helpful thought? What's a helpful thought? And then you write that down. It could be words of affirmation. It could be, well, what does God say about me? And sometimes I Google, what is some scripture, to help me with this? And then I'll write that down on that notepad and I'll stick it where I can see it, on my steering wheel, on my bathroom mirror. And that will help me with those thoughts. And you're going to have to do that a lot. It is a process. That is one thing that I've learned, with this. It is a process. So it takes time to change your thoughts habits. It takes time to get used to acknowledging where you're at and to talking to those safe people in your community about what you're dealing with. But over time, it's worth it. You're worth it to put those things into place for yourself. And I would also want to say this: if you have been struggling for 4 to 6 months, where anxiety and depression has just felt debilitating, where you even struggle to do normal day-to-day activities, friend, your body is telling you that you need additional help. You need someone who is a therapist, a doctor. Your body is saying we need help. If it was a broken arm, if it was heart disease, if it was diabetes, you would listen.
Yeah.
We would listen to those cues and we would go get help. So your brain is telling you, I need help.
I
And
remember when I was first thinking of, excuse me, going to marry my husband the second time. And I asked, he's a medical doctor. So I asked him as a test, I said, would you ever prescribe antidepressants? He goes, if they needed it. I thought, that's so practical. And a friend of mine, when she found out she needed antidepressants, she goes, it was Sue, it was like taking off my sunglasses. I didn't know I was looking at the world through sunglasses during the middle of the day or at my own house,
Yes.
And I thought, wow, what freedom we have. Of course, we'll go to the doctor with a broken arm. There'd be no question. But when we're feeling depressed, I love it that you put 4 to 6 months. I would say 4 to 6 weeks, but yeah, 4 to 6. Anyway, if you're feeling bad today and you've been hesitating, I hope that what Caris is saying here is encouraging to you. And another thing about what you said about putting good things in, God is so good, of course, but he's so practical. And when in Philippians, is it Philippians 4, where he says, be anxious for nothing.
4:6. Yeah.
He doesn't just say be anxious for nothing. He doesn't leave us in a vacuum or in a void. He says to put something else in its place.
That's right.
Which is to pray and to give thanksgiving and to pray with thanksgiving.
Gratitude. Yes.
And for me to pray with thanksgiving when my heart is hurting, mostly over my kids, because that's where our hearts hurt the most. It's hard for me to pray with thanksgiving, but I just have to say it out loud, like you say, to write it down. To be a mom is overwhelming. Describe a time when you felt overwhelmed and how you dealt with it. It can be yesterday.
I was about to say, just pick one time.
Yeah, because we have to close up in just a minute.
I know. I think an overwhelming time for me was when my youngest daughter started kindergarten, and my oldest daughter was at elementary school, and I had to learn how to do 2 car lines. I had to get my time just right to get the one and make sure she wasn't in the car too long before she just got too tired and just had a, as we say in Alabama, a complete come apart before I got the other one, and to make sure they were both involved in multiple, like dance and basketball and horse riding. And we had so many things, and they were so little.
Yeah.
And I was a young mama, and I felt overwhelmed, and they felt overwhelmed, and it was too much. I was finding myself hiding in my bathroom with my chocolate secret stash that I still have to this day, but it was too much. It was just too much. And I had to breathe. I just had to breathe and be like, okay, Lord, I can't mom this way for the rest of these years, for the rest that I'm going to be driving them. What do we do? And that's kind of where I began to learn how to put margin in my life, how to say, they don't have to do all the activities. Nope. I don't have to be the homeroom mom for both of them. I don't have to be over all the activities at school and at church and, get all these things correct. And I don't have to be the first one in the car line. I don't have to be the first. And they're going to be okay if I'm not. So that's where I begin to learn to say, I begin to learn to say no.
No.
I begin to learn to say no.
And not only that, to say no and not feel badly about yourself.
Exactly.
No shame. There's no, I say shame is from the pit, and we're not pit people. I remember a friend telling me, you could teach Sunday school, and so you should. And I said, I know I could, but that's not what I'm called to do today. Right. And it was a little touchy in our relationship for a while. And I just had to release it because it's not who God, I did teach for a summer, but it's not my thing.
Right.
And I think we need to realize, and of course, social media doesn't help when we see that everybody else is doing all these things. I had a friend say to me once, Sue, you have a bigger capacity for busy than I do. Well, I never thought of myself as that way, but I did compared to her. But she was so self-assured as to who God made her. It didn't bother her. We were friends, equal. Yeah, so good. Her mental health was, her cap was on correctly that day. And it just showed me who I was. And I'm not going to feel guilty about being busy. That's just who I am. Right. Someone said, why do you want to start podcasting? I go, well, why not? I don't have grandchildren. And so I think we get into this comparison pit, and we need a coach often to help us crawl out on a ladder with the steps far enough away that makes us grow, but doesn't make us stumble. And so I think really that's what a coach does. As you know, this podcast is on legacy. Caris, what is your legacy that you want to pass on to those who know and love you?
I want to pass on to them that it is normal to talk about faith and mental health. I
Good.
want them to know that, that is nothing that you hide your head in shame about, your head in the sand. Keep your head out of the sand and talk about it. Talk to God about it. Know that it is the right thing to do, to ask for help and not try to put yourself, behind a barrier to do life alone. We were meant to do life together. We were meant to help one another. And God gave us our faith. He gave us our mental health. So let's take care of it. Let's take care of our bodies. And I want my daughters to know that. I want them to know that they can come to God with all the things. And I mean,
all the
things. And I want them to know, that they don't have to live this life to please others, to say yes, to please others. We're here to please and glorify God. And I think in all those words, I would want that to be my legacy.
What obstacles did you have to overcome or challenges to face to make sure that that was true in your legacy?
I had to overcome my desire to look perfect to everyone around me, to, look like I was the perfect, quote unquote, Christian mom, the perfect, ministry leader, the perfect coach, that I had it all together. I had to take that mask off. Stop wearing the mask. And if you're wearing a mask, you can take your mask off today. And so that was a hard thing to do. It's easy for me to say now, but taking that mask off was a hard thing to do. But when I did it, there was freedom there. There was freedom there.
During COVID, I stopped wearing lipstick. So that was kind of my taking my mask off.
So great.
How does your life embody God's welcoming heart?
It embodies his heart, his welcoming heart, through being transparent and vulnerable, through knowing that I can come to my Heavenly Father. Even before our recording today of this conversation, I found myself in tears driving my car to the post office with something that was going on in my heart, knowing, and it was little, but it was big to me, and knowing that I could talk about it while I'm driving down the road to my little country post office, and God cared about it.
Yeah.
And he cares about all the things. And that has just been something that has been such a sweet thing for me to learn, is that God cares about the little things of my life, the big things of my life. And I can cry to him. I can laugh with him. I can yell. I can be upset, and I can bring all of it to him. And he lets me come as I am, and he meets me there. And I'm just grateful. I'm just so grateful for that. Even now, I'm just thinking about it, brings tears to my eyes to know that we are welcome to be transparent and vulnerable with God.
And we just heard about that in a message on Sunday, talking about the church being a family. We really can't tell the world that God is welcoming until we have embraced his welcome ourselves. And that's exactly what you were describing. And it's almost like we can't tell another mother that you're going to be okay until we've hit the pit ourselves and come to him and said, Lord, I'm a mess. I just blew it. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. And then we receive his grace, and that's why we can pass it on to someone else. If someone today is listening and saying, gosh, I never had that opportunity to minister, maybe ask the Lord, do I need to be more vulnerable with you, Lord, first, and come to him with all of our needs? And then that's when we can go, you know what? I'm not any better than you. I just know someone who can help you.
That's right.
And anyway, so this has been a delight and very much an encouragement. Is there anything else you want to share at the end? How can people reach you?
Yes, they can reach me through my website, which is my name, Caris Snider, CarisSnider.com. You can contact me there for coaching. You can look up my books, my resources, even as a speaker, you can look for that information. And I enjoy hanging out on Instagram and Facebook as well, at Caris Snider. So I would love for you to reach out and connect with me and meet you virtually in that way too.
And I know you offered a free discovery call. Are there any other free resources that they could find on your website?
Yes. So I have a resource page for moms, for kids. Like if you have children who are feeling anxious, it's a downloadable that you can have of activities you can do to help them with anxiety.
Oh,
But then,
wonderful.
yeah, but then when you subscribe to my email list, I call it my email family. When you become a part of that, you get lots of freebies. There is a free download right now when you feel overwhelmed, kind of like even a gratitude list, a back to school guide for moms. I love to give out freebies. So you'll get several of those when you subscribe to my email list.
Fabulous. And spell your name once again.
CarisSnider.
Okay, wonderful. This has been delightful. God bless you. Thank you for joining me.